We're going to talk about cutting a round hole, like for a shower mixer, out of Intaglio hexagon tiles. This is done in much the same way as you do for a porcelain tile, but glass chips and fractures a little easier than porcelain, so you have to be a little more careful. We want to keep a good flow of water on the tile throughout the process to avoid chipping. I'm going to assume you've selected a mixer that has at least a ½ inch of coverage over the cut to hide imperfections. If you can get more than that, it gives you a little more margin for error. Before you start cutting, put on your eye protection and at least consider wearing gloves. I've marked both the top and bottom of the tile. Obviously, you want to plan your layout so the mixer falls between 2 or 3 tiles so you're not trying to cut a circle out of the middle of one tile. A smaller blade would make this easier, but I think a 4-inch dry blade would cause too much chipping, so I'm going to do this with a large saw with a 10-inch blade. If you have a water-fed grinder or a helper that can keep water on the blade, a smaller continuous rim blade would be easier to use. I'm going to start on the bottom side and try to get a partial cut along the entire line. So you can see I'm going to go just a little bit, moving the tile slowly until I get all the way across on the circle. Once I finish that line, I make a similar cut on the top. With both the top and bottom lightly cut, I start to make relief cuts into the circle. This is where glass shards really start flying. Make sure that anyone even watching you now is wearing eye protection. Knowing that glass shatters easier than porcelain or ceramic tile, I make these cuts slower and closer together than I would with either of those materials. I'm holding the tile up off the tray to do this, which is a little riskier than leaving it flat on the tray. I'm doing this because with a 10-inch blade I'd be a long way back from where I want to cut the B on the bottom, but there's a greater risk of the tile catching the blade this way. I'm being very careful to avoid this, and I've done it for many years. If you're not experienced with this, leave the tile flat on the tray and cut both sides, starting with the top to be safe. I'd also recommend wearing gloves to protect your hands. You will have to pick up the tile for the final process, but there's less chance of the blade catching after all the relief cuts have been made. When I can, I cut across the cuts to shorten the distance of the cuts in the middle of the circle. Once I've made cuts along the entire radius mark, I break off the long cuts that are still intact and trim up the jagged edges gently with a saw. The more you can do this cutting into the tile instead of grinding it off with the side of the blade, the longer your blade will last, but you will have to do some grinding. It's a slow process, but when I'm done I have a usable cut. For safety, I would carefully finish this cut with some 80 to 100 grit resin-back sandpaper to remove any sharp edges that could cut you or someone else after the tile is installed. Make sure to get both sides in the middle before you put it up on the wall. So that's how we cut a circular hole in Intaglio hex tile. This will work with other kinds of glass as well. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. If you have holes to drill, we've got a video on that as well.